make the trek out to Burning Man for a week and a day. After a lot of work, oh, there's a lot of play. Party, 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 drama, 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 bitch, bitch, bitch. Year after year, they come back to scratch that itch. They all say their lives have been changed. After many years, lives have been rearranged. That change is what this show is all about. You'll see the impact of Burning Man up and out. So sit back, relax, and cancel all your plans. These are the stories about the shadow of the man.
Hello, and welcome to the Shadow of the Man Show. I'm your host, Andy. Wait, I think it might be that Andy. Today our guest is Nurse, aka Jess Bobier. That's how you pronounce it, right?
That is correct.
Uh-huh. Well, where did it all begin? Like, what was your first year on the playa? What got you to go to Burning Man?
Well, Andy Grace, aka Action Girl,
Uh-huh.
she was dating somebody at the time who turned to us after a great annual event at the time in San Francisco called the Cyberbus Ball. And he said, "You ladies now live in San Francisco. You owe it to yourselves to go to this thing in the desert. There are hot springs, which there were at the time that you could access, and amazing art and neon and light like you have never seen. It's called Burning Man."
Mm-hmm.
And that was the first trip.
What year was that?
That was 97.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That was the Hualapai Playa.
it was. It was. Yeah, it sounded irresistible. And at the time I was 25, I said, why not? We'll leave Friday night and come back after the event. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Do they still burn the man on Sunday then?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's my
Saturday came later.
Yeah, because I mean, 'cause I that was a similar story. Like my first year was '96. And I remember we just like went there for like we got there Saturday and then came back Monday. I mean, it's funny thinking about it now. People are like, "Oh, I've been up there for like people be up there for like weeks and months,"
Right. Right.
But
You have no idea.
it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you went in '97, and so where'd you camp? Like, what did you do?
So it was interesting. Andy played in a band with a group of folks, some of whom had formed a camp, I believe, for 96, along with the theme Helco, Motel 666. And
Mm-hmm.
our friend Beth Grunvig that year in 96 had made a huge, in the uh, like a Motel 6 logo, but it was Motel 666.
Yeah, I remember that actually passing by that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my first year out there. And it was a
Ah.
great group to fall in with. And I have remained part of that friend group ever since. I
Okay, I
haven't always
have
known them, but
this like very fuzzy memory of like walking by, I think it was by Motel 666 like at night, and there's these people that made like a giant bucket of like glow juice, and then they were sticking model rockets in the glow juice and then shooting them off into the sky. And then you just see this glowing thing going up and then coming down, like, yeah, watch out, it doesn't hit you.
prior to the Earth Guardians.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 So was that Motel 666 or not? Maybe.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, as I recall, back in the late 90s, early aughts, we were in walk-in camping and it was a very active neighborhood. I haven't spent much time out there in recent years.
Mhm.
It doesn't quite feel as theme campy as it did in the late 90s, early aughts. It felt a little more community, and now maybe a little more functional for folks who don't want to be close to the action.
Mhm.
Um,
The
but that being
walk-in,
said, yeah, I haven't spent much time out there.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's for the listeners at home. The walk-in camping is like way in the back. Like the Esplanade in the front is, I guess the highest traffic kind of areas, right? And so in the back, the walk-in camping is like, yeah, it's for
Yeah.
people who
So in
want to
the
be quieter. Yeah,
concentric circles.
yeah.
So,
But
but
also back then in '97, it was probably what it went up to like D.
maybe.
Or-
And it was not circular, as you'll remember. Hualapai was
Yeah,
an angled, maybe the last section of those outer streets were angled at like 45 degrees, something like that. It was
yeah,
a very
yeah,
different setup from what we know of today.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So I mean, so nowadays the streets go to what was it, like J or something. I mean, it's like almost a mile, I think, from the Esplanade, like all the way to the back now.
It's
Whereas
crazy. There are so many streets. I think it actually goes to K now.
K, wow,
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah. It's back there.
So does Motel 666 like how long did they persist on the plot? Are they still around these days, or is it
Well,
kind of morphed?
the group has changed names. It's now Versed. Um, it continues to be an unregistered camp. Um, and I think it was close to 22 years ago when some of the guys in the camp, spearheaded by Edgar Blazona, said, let's have an art survey for folks, and we'll put on lab jackets and we'll walk around and we'll survey people. Not a serious survey, but really
Mhm.
for fun and the purposes of interacting and doing a shtick at Burning Man. And they said, well, if we're doing this, we need to have a centralized office on the open playa. So I say spearheaded by Edgar because he has constructed what he refers to as his modular dwellings, very mid-modern century, very, very nice lines. And they put together the office and they were depositing surveys. And then before we knew it, there was a DJ rig, a bar, and that group has formalized the office. It's completely unregistered. Um, I believe that there has been questioning by the art department in the past as to what they thought they were doing out on the open playa unregistered, which is very ironic given that it's Burning Man. And the office to this day is just a delightful mess of bureaucracy and paperwork and music. We've got
Oh
the
yeah.
tickets, like you can take tickets at the meat counter with a counter, and the kids are lining up and there is a survey, which is just ridiculous and fun. And we do parking permits, K parking permits, so you can park anywhere on the playa. And that's a great shtick that continues to live on. So yeah, a lot of paperwork at the office.
Yeah, I think it was out there. They had the office party or something,
Yes.
and I remember like it was all like lines of people, and they had these forms and filling them out, and
Yes.
some
It's
people like took it so seriously. They're like, I have to fill out all of this.
it's pretty cute, and a lot of young burners like in their 20s, and they're like, okay, if this is what we have to do to get a drink, we're in. We'll do it. Like, give us the pencil, give us the clipboard. It's very cute, and it's just delightful to witness because it's so incredibly participatory and just a little bit of something for everyone. So
And is that like a 24/7? Like the people are out there doing stuff, or just kind of like whenever they kind of get there and feel like it?
Thursday night is the night. So
Ah,
that's the big night. So anybody's welcome to come
yeah.
find us out on the playa Thursday night, generally between 10 o'clock and the man in the open playa area. And there's a little arrow on top of the office. The office is orange. The arrow it's a vintage arrow sign with brightly colored light bulbs that flash in different patterns. Um, it's so sweet. And it has become a gathering point. And then Friday night, I think they're generally there, and Saturday after the burn. And then I think
Okay.
generally Sunday is pack up and Yeah,
Hmm.
get
No, it's
ready
funny
for it.
because like when we were first talking about that, it was like, oh, is that the birth of the census? Because I mean, right? Because they wear lab coats and go around and
Yeah,
take
yeah,
surveys and stuff, and I was like,
yeah,
oh, that sounds like that, but that's entirely different, right?
totally. Those guys are for real.
Yeah,
So
yeah, because the census didn't come around until I think like many years later, right?
yeah, the census. I want to say that I met Countess Megan, who started the census in like 2003, maybe
Uh-huh. Hmm.
2002.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, have you? How many years have you been going? Have you been going like continually since '97, or?
More or less, I have been. I went to nursing school in April of 2007. It was an accelerated program. And I did not go to Burning Man that summer, August 2007. I was working at UCSF. It seemed a little bit crazy to try and get up to the Black Rock Desert for a
Hmm.
3-day weekend and come right back and fall into work.
Yeah.
Um, so that year I missed. I did not go out for 2021 for the Renegade Burn.
Oh
I
yeah.
think it was 2021.
Yeah.
Um, and that was, I think it's my biggest Burning Man regret.
Really? Have you
Yeah,
gone?
I was sure that somebody was going to die. Said there's no way that this group of people are going to be able to manage themselves. You know, people don't know what they're doing. They're driving cars. It's nighttime. There are no rules. There's nobody telling you what to do or not to do.
Uh,
Um,
you feel
and then
like you might have missed out on that death, or what?
I I just missed out on such an amazing experience. I mean, have you talked to anybody that went to Renegade that
Oh
didn't say
yeah.
it was amazing?
Yeah. What about that like Fourth of July? Have you ever gone
Mm.
out there and done that?
A lot of Fourth of July trips.
Uh-huh.
We also have a group of friends that went up several years in a row for what they called New Moony, and we would
Oh,
go when there was no moon, so that you
oh
could really
wow.
enjoy the Milky Way. And I guess I would imagine most people listening to the podcast have been to the event, but if you haven't, the Black Rock Desert is a gorgeous geologic feature. It's a dry lake bed, tremendously large, ringed by mountains, more or less, and very little to no light pollution.
Yeah.
And camping out there is stellar, whether it's a full moon or not a full moon. But we had several trips, many years worth, called New Moony, where we go
Wow.
out there. And then there were scouting trips for New Moony, where we would investigate adjacent playas in
Oh
Nevada.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw some people who took some interesting pictures. I think was it last summer, like for with builds, like when they're hanging out there like early and with what do you call it, the Northern Lights? Because I guess the
Oh,
Northern
yes.
Lights like came down
Yes.
like that far.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
the Northern Lights this year were amazing. They went
Oh.
on, and we were seeing a lot of them in the U.S. Western states, and I'm sure in the East.
Uh-huh.
Um, I was at Bonnie Reese's house. She's a longtime burner and artist. She has a beautiful art car called the Sky Rabbit's House,
Hmm.
and I went down to her place in October in the desert, and that was in Joshua Tree. And
Mm-hmm.
then we were seeing the Northern Lights in California at night. That was by phone
Really?
only. Andy Grace said you need to use your telephone and you can actually capture the
Wow.
Northern Lights. So I can only imagine on the playa how amazing that show was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. So how long are you on the playa for? Like, are you there like early like build or?
I am not. I don't work for the event and generally am holding down a job with limited time off. So,
Yeah, I know that.
yeah, basically there for the week of the event, but every opportunity eking out a little more time. I love being up there pre-event. It's just so magical. Everybody is
Hmm.
working hard, heads are down. It's calm, peaceful. There's a different sense of community as everybody is there building together.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And
And you work in the Media Mecca, or have you been?
I do. I've
How,
always been at Media Mecca
so how long have you been with Media Mecca?
forever. Um,
Since the beginning?
I ended up doing a tour of Black Rock City in the back seat of a Washoe County sheriff's vehicle with Candace Locklear, aka Evil Pippi, and we were out with them for probably an hour and a half. And mind you, this is only my second year on the playa. It was towards the end of the event, and that
This
was
is voluntarily, I take it.
voluntarily, yes.
Not in
No
handcuffs.
handcuffs. No handcuffs were involved. And it was delightful and fantastic. And I had already, for me, connected the dots and the significance of Burning Man. Like, this is a community, it has so much to offer. This isn't just a party in the desert. And this is the social importance of what's happening here. And that, we cruised from, the 9 o'clock side to the 3 o'clock side, open playa, and talked about what we were seeing and explaining to these sheriffs, like, this is what's going on.
Huh.
And we got out of the car and I turned to Candace and I said, I don't know what we just did, but I want to do more. And she said, well, we have a team meeting in November back in the city, so come to the meeting. And that was how I got involved with Media Mecca.
Well, how did how did you wind up in the back seat of the sheriff? I mean, like, how did that
I
come
was
about?
I was hanging out with Candace, and
Uh-huh.
she is the person responsible for starting Media Mecca with Marion,
Uh-huh.
I believe in 96.
Yeah, yeah. So they just decided like, oh, let's take the sheriff out for a ride and show him around.
Yeah, actually was not uncommon in those days
Uh-huh.
where Marion, being basically responsible for a lot of communication, um, was interacting with BLM officers. I became familiar with a few officers over the years.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was just part of the job, really. And like, here's an opportunity to go show somebody who is uninitiated and
Hmm.
help them understand what it is that they're seeing, because sometimes to the unaided eye, it's easy to draw assumptions.
Hmm.
And it's,
So that's pretty much the mission of Media Mecca, or like how would you describe it?
yeah, it really is the mission of Media Mecca. I will say that process for, let's say, public office and other officials, that has its own spin-off team, XRT.
Hmm.
And we work with the press. I will note that in the last year, we've had a significant bump up in documentaries.
Oh,
20,
really?
yeah, 20 years ago when we were doing this, it was a lot of press who were coming uninitiated. And that was our main job, was to connect with them. And we did that months in advance of
Hmm.
arriving on Playa, and helping to level set. So when they showed up on the Playa, they could plug in to the community rather than take it as they would any other story.
Yeah. Because wasn't there some story with like MTV showing up and they well, what was the story with MTV?
So, to the best of my recollection, MTV registered with us. We turned them down. Just of note for everybody, it's a private event, even though it's held on public lands. And Burning Man is protective of imagery that is captured at the event and is able to do so because it is a private event. And so that's the other part of what we do at Media Mecca, is helping to not necessarily control the story, but there are plenty of things that happen at Burning Man that make it what it is. And that's an amazing community. And that's really where we want to see the story.
Mm.
And um,
And
I
is it?
lost,
Oh
I
no,
lost where I was.
what was that?
I lost where I was.
Oh, sorry. Well, well, another question I had was, I mean, is Media Mecca mainly interfacing with like media organizations, or is it also kind of like acculturating, participants in terms of like, like photography and to video people? Because I remember
That's
years ago you used to have like to go get like a tag for like your video camera or something.
Yeah. So there was, I believe there was a time when we did video tags for personal, and that was handled through Playa Info. But of course,
Uh,
today with everybody on a cell phone and the ability to capture imagery, that's really run away.
mm-hmm,
And I think right now the communications department is at an inflection point. How do we engage with influencers and what have you? And
mm-hmm,
how do you work with that population? And there are rules around how images are captured and used. Like if you're going to broadcast a photo as an advertisement and it's capturing specific elements in that imagery, for instance, the man figure,
uh-huh.
Burning Man has set the legal precedence that we protect that, and a letter will be sent when there's inappropriate usage. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as like your everyday participant, Media Mecca does not handle that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like for commercial use, you guys would come in, but personal use,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now, if people think that they might do something, we have, I believe the way we do it is we have a personal use so that we can capture their information, and they will
Mm-hmm,
be saying to us, like, we have no idea if this is what we want to do.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think, if I'm remembering this correctly, as the years have gone by, I've moved further and further from the process.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So, what's the story with all of these documentaries? You're saying like, you said, the past couple of years has been a couple of different groups, or
Well, I think part of it is the event is at such a size and people are
mm-hmm,
having varied experiences that they want to tell their story of the playa.
uh-huh,
So it's documenting the building of the camp or, the artists. And there are a million nuanced stories um, within that subset. And again, this is something where I have self-selected and kind of moved away from um, in terms of being really one-to-one close with what's happening
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
with the stories. It's for me the thing that really had my heart in working with Media Mecca was working with press who hadn't been to the event and just helping them to acculturate.
mm-hmm,
And back, 20, 25 years ago, we served as a place where folks could come back and say, I saw this thing. What is going on? Or I'm completely overwhelmed by this environment.
mm-hmm.
Please help me get grounded in all of the chaos that is Burning Man.
Yeah.
And that's the piece for me. So I have to admit, when I hear documentary, I kind of turn off.
It's also kind of like a Burning Man. Like, I have a podcast about Burning Man. Like, yeah.
Another
Yeah.
podcast about Burning Man. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But there's a lot of great stuff going on out there.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't mean in any way to diss any work that folks are doing
Yeah.
with documentary.
Well, another question I had was just like the nature of the Media Mecca's work like over the years that like you said, like in the beginning, a lot of these media outlets like wouldn't really understand what Burning Man was about, but then they get kind of acculturated and they were like, and then so like even
Mhm.
coming back a couple. I mean, I don't know if you have the same outlets coming back like year after year after year, or maybe it's like after so many decades. Like, I mean, do you still see like the same outlets, or are you just kind of like, oh, they don't really need the help anymore, or is it more like foreign outlets or different?
Well, we've seen some people come back. I think the real initiative for us is as burners to help folks understand it's their experience. So, really shedding, and this has been true from the beginning, right? Shedding what you have of the outside world
Mm-hmm.
so that you can actually be here now on the playa and be a piece of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Ron John infamously one year had put on their laminated tags, this is your media pass. It entitles you to absolutely nothing. No spitting. Thank you. You know, um, but really helping people to understand they're going to get so much more of it if they can actually start interacting with people.
Mm-hmm.
Let it not be transactional, which is something Larry talked about. We're really, this is not, we don't work in transactional relationships on the playa.
Yeah. Yeah. No barter.
No barter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really helping folks to seek out those stories. I think that's where a lot of our energy is going.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's the fact that the organization has grown, and what we did 20 years ago, as in everything else that is having to do with Burning Man over the years and the
Mm-hmm.
growth, we evolve and processes change. And
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to shed that.
That's true.
So, okay, this is not 25 years ago. So stop thinking about what it was 25 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's like it's an evolution, it's a progression, you know. I mean, it's not the early days of, I mean, when people were driving around all over the place and running over people in tents and
Yeah. So true.
yeah. All right. So, all right. Well, let's see. Okay, how about let's get to your background. So it's like, what's your story? So where does little baby nurse grow up? And like, what
Little
was your
baby
life?
nurse grew up in Oakland, California.
Oh.
And I moved back here after college. And it wasn't soon after that I moved back here that I was introduced to Burning Man. And for a long time, I believed that it was my destiny that I was born in the Bay Area and was to come back, because I've always been a little outside of the normal.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, connecting with the Burning Man community, I said, I found my people. So I've always been a little bit of maybe the wing nut in the group, uh, not really wanting to conform to the standard, um, which sometimes for me, and we can talk about any given environment,
Mm.
I may find constricting and or objectionable or lacking uh, creativity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a lot of who I am, and I think that I struggled for a long time as a young person and an adult to find myself.
So you said you were involved with the, what was it, the cyber bus ball? Like, because I remember, like, is that kind of cacophony related or kind of? Because I mean, because I lived in the Bay Area with like 94 to 2001 or something. Because I remember like going to some of these things because that's what he said, cyber bus ball. I was like, wow, that sounds so familiar.
So the cyberbus kids were coming out to Burning Man, definitely early times,
Uh-huh.
maybe 95. Cyberbus Sam was one of the characters. They had a short school bus, possibly painted silver. I feel like Cyberbus, I feel there is some association with a lot of silver. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he had actually somehow brought out internet to the playa in 96 or 97 on the Cyberbus. Somebody out there can speak to the technology.
Yeah.
So I think that they were cacophony society adjacent. I think back in that time period, we had a lot of crossover. The Venn diagram, the
Mm-hmm.
two circles were very, very much in a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was like survival research laboratories too, or the
absolutely.
seamen. I
Yep,
remember that. Like, yeah,
yep.
yeah. I don't know if you remember, like there was a survival research laboratory thing. It was like underneath the highway in San Francisco, and they had this big tower. It looked like a water tower, and it had this big like tank, and it had this like liquid, and there was hundreds and hundreds of people all around. And they had some robot and a claw, and then it collapsed, and this liquid came out, and I don't know what it was. I think it was some combination of like rancid sardine oil and like white diamonds and like it was just like this chemical attack. I mean, like immediately, like all these like, hundreds of people just started immediately just backing up and going. It was almost like a stampede of people. Like, yeah.
It sounds very typical of the time.
Yeah, yeah. And then there were like scavenger hunts.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Popcorn
don't
Anti-Theater. I don't know if you remember that. That was a
know.
great group of
Uh,
folks that had performances, and they rented a bus, and the bus would take us around to different sites where people did performances or
uh,
interactive pieces.
do they still? There's stuff like still happening like in the Bay Area or?
I think so, but I feel like some of the newer groups, I don't know. Cacophony is out there. They're doing things. There
Hmm.
are a couple of groups that are doing um, pretty significant pieces for groups. There are at least two groups that I know of that do very intensive work for a one night event.
Hmm.
There was a group who did one this year on the solstice, and a group who did a similar event on the solstice last year, where you brought your bike and you showed up at a waypoint and they gave you a map, and then you were set loose in the city to seek out these installations and happenings
Oh
and art
wow.
pieces.
Yeah.
Um, and that's, yes, of course, it is still happening. I don't know what I'm saying. Yes, it is still happening. It's on a different level. I mean, I think with technology and our evolution in this day and age, things are so much different.
Yeah,
But yes, those
yeah.
things are still happening.
Like the salmon and the beta breakers.
Oh,
That
absolutely.
still happens.
That still happens.
For the folks listening at home, beta breakers is a race from where does it start? It's like
It
the
starts kind of
Embarcadero
close.
or something.
Yeah, it starts close to the ferry building,
Yeah.
maybe a couple blocks south of there, or maybe it's on Market.
And then it goes out to like Ocean Beach or something.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the race. And so I guess what was it Cacophony or who originally did that? Like
I
is it,
feel like it's Cacophony who originally did that, but that might be my.
yeah. So for the listeners at home, these people dressed up as fish or salmon and went the opposite way.
I mean, even
Yeah.
going to that race, there people are having parties along the way, but they
Oh
feel
yeah.
very, like, it doesn't feel like a Super Bowl party or it's like an interactive, like we are the people and we're interacting with the people and we're meeting strangers and
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, I remember because I would when I lived in San Francisco, I always would tend to like miss these things, and I would be like at a bar or something, and then people would show up and they're like all these costumes. I'm like, what's going on here? And like, ah, Beta Breaker. It's like, oh, I missed it
yeah,
again.
yeah.
And I remember like there's these guys, and they were like they're all wearing these like pink like slips, and they're like, we're the pink slips. And they were all like sunburned, so they're all were pink, like completely, like
I love it. I
yeah.
love
But then they would like they told me that they had like a shopping cart and they had like a keg in it, and then they were like, I mean, most people think like, oh, it's a race. It's like, well,
Yeah.
nominally, it's a race. If you're passing out beers here, you're like
Right, right.
compatriots.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Burning Man still has like their what do you call it? Oh, I'm forgetting them. Like after the burn,
The
like
decompression party.
decompression. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Decompression is great. But again, I have not been in years. I
Hmm.
was very close to going this year, and I think I was out of town.
Well,
Uh,
where do they have it nowadays, and how big is it?
I feel like it's pretty big. For a long time, it was on the eastern side of Potrero Hill in that area called Dog Patch. I
Oh
don't, I
yeah,
feel like it's moved from there, but I'm not sure where it's happening.
yeah. I'll go back there for one of these days for that. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess this gets us to our next part of the show is the impact of Burning Man on you. So, I mean, you've been doing this what almost 30 years now? I mean, next year will be
It's been it's been 25.
uh-huh.
Um, it's hard for me to say how it's impacted my life because I feel like it's been here like my prefrontal cortex came into complete formation when I was 23 or 25. And then, I was at Burning Man. I think, the piece around interactions not being transactional.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People will ask, "Oh, you're going after all these years still. Like, what? Why?"
Mm-hmm.
It's the people. And I think I grew up in a family that was not necessarily about people.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, I mean, very business-like in my family, not a lot of affection,
Mm-hmm.
not a lot of interpersonal connection. And I think that really, um, in a way, has really saved me and helped direct who I am today. And people will say to me, like, you tell us that about your family, but you seem very affectionate and loving. I
Yeah.
say,
What
well,
happened?
I was missing that. Yeah, I went to Burning Man. Um, so I think, it's made me more aware of the world in a much more humanistic way, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then the intertwining of creativity. It's really, I'm starting to understand now at 53, like being creative is kind of essential to being a human and being grounded. And I've always had some art in my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And really like this living, you will go to burner events or burners homes back in the quote unquote default world, and you see a lot of living through creativity in a very different way to approaching life. And I think that's an added perspective I wouldn't otherwise have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Creativity. I mean, when you think about it, it's like that's essentially what life is all about, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's like where I mean, your mom and dad create you, and then here you are, and it's like, what do you do with your life? I mean, for me, like the meaning of life is I'm always just like, well, it's to do something.
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
what is that something? I'm just like, I don't know. Like you're the one to figure that out. But creativity, yeah, I mean. And I guess that's like the beauty about Burning Man is like a safe space for you to radically express yourself. And
yeah,
because I know for me personally, it's like I in my life people just always tell me it's like like, oh, I want to do this, and there's like, no, like you can't do that, or like, oh, that's not a good idea. Like, why would you want to do that? It's always like, oh, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I love that the aspect of the playa where like people are encouraging to each other, and
yeah.
and it's just like not only is like are you free to do it, but people will cheer you on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what about you? Like, do you any art that you've created on the playa, or
Ironically, I have never created a piece of art on the playa. I've
uh
never brought a piece of art. I've thought about it. It might still happen. Um,
well, art could be many things, right? I mean, it's not just like an installation or I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah. For me, I love connecting people. Um, this year, one of my informal missions for myself was spreading the word about the family reunion for Black burners. There's a beautiful project by Erin Douglas, where she does a
oh,
family portrait of Black people on the playa.
oh really?
And I believe she's kept the date, time, day kind of on the down low, and it's been a word of mouth piece.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think really to avoid it turning into a looky-loo situation. And it's
Mm,
there for Black people to celebrate themselves in an
mm-hmm.
environment that is safe to do so.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that was every Black person I came across on the playa this year. I told them about the family portrait. And I didn't have all the details. And I said, you can go find Erin Douglas or somebody who knows her in her camp. This is
Mm-hmm.
where the camp is. This was very playa, circa
Yeah.
2000. Um, I met a very interesting, funny PA, physician's assistant, um, from somewhere north of Seattle. And I had met him in the commissary, had been volunteering. And I said, I'm not exactly sure, but you can come to Media Mecca and I can get you some more details. So I came to Media Mecca and I really didn't have more details. Well, he found them, and uh, it was by coincidence that he found them. And then he came back to me and he said, I found them.
Ah.
And he had a profound experience. And he came across them as they were doing a healing ceremony. So for me, talking about those things
Mm-hmm.
with people and letting people know, like, these are some of the things that are happening at Burning Man today.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know, there aren't a lot of Black people at Burning Man.
Yeah.
And that's really meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
So any opportunity I have to connect a person to a thing or another person, I seize upon that. And I like to be able to host people and bring people in. They need a break from the heat. You know, you just never know what you're going to run across on the playa.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it seems like Media Mecca is a natural fit for you, you know? I mean, it's just connecting people.
I think it is.
Yeah,
I think it is. I really enjoy it.
yeah. Well, I mean, that's its own particular form of art.
Yeah,
I think art is kind of like an expansive term. It doesn't have to mean just like, oh, like I'm a DJ, or like, I'm an installation art creator, or I bake cookies. I don't know. I
well,
remember back in the day, people would just have like a megaphone and just like, and they
yeah,
thought that,
I appreciate that perspective. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, definitely. You know, if you know how to use it with your words, megaphone is very powerful and entertaining on the playa. And there are so
Yeah.
many permeations of what is art on the playa.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's funny because I had like a 13-year gap. My last year was like 2011, and this year
right,
was like the first year I came back. But people always ask me like, "Oh, what's different?" But like now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, yeah, I don't recall anybody with a megaphone. Like I'm not sure if that was like a thing in the past, or now people are like, ah, that's just annoying.
right. That's a good question. The last really artful megaphoning that I knew of on the playa was the boardroom. This was fantastic. This was a group from
What's that?
Canada, and they had a motorized boardroom,
Uh-huh.
and they dressed in suits, and somebody had a megaphone. I think I'm getting this right. Um, and they had people that were really gifted with the megaphone, because anybody can have a megaphone.
Yeah, I remember quite a few jackasses,
Yeah,
who
yeah,
needed to have them taken away.
yeah. But you can have a lot of fun as the board at Burning Man in the boardroom
Huh.
doing business, cruising the playa with
Yeah.
a properly handled megaphone.
That's funny because that sounds so familiar. I remember these guys in these suits, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
All these things like blend together
yeah.
over like all these years. Yeah, yeah. At least they weren't the Aesthetic Meat Foundation. Those guys are entirely different.
That was something that I experienced my first year there that really left an impression on me. And I remember the gentleman, I don't know if he was at the aesthetic meat camp or separate from them, but riding around in the back of a pickup truck suspended from his own back, hooks in his back. And he,
Yeah.
that was part of, like, wow, this is all happening here, and this is far out. Like, I've never seen anything like that. My eyes were huge. And that was my first experience going to Cyberbus Ball. I rounded the corner, and here was something I'd never seen before. There were Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. I've never seen those
Oh,
guys.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
everybody costumed to the nines. And I just saying, oh, wow, I've landed. And that to me was kind of a natural extension from Burning Man.
hmm Do you still feel like that sense of awe when you go out there all these years later? I mean, do you still come across things you're just like, wow, look at
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
that?
Yeah. There are the unexpected things that you see out on the playa.
Uh-huh.
there are the things that I've never participated in, but you go, oh wow, the Bijou Theater that was out at the
Oh yeah.
fence showing a midnight movie with popcorn. What in
Mhm.
the business is that about?
Yeah.
Um, Last year, out on an art tour in the morning, this would have been 2023, coming across an installation. Here's the huge fire extinguisher art car and something else. And then folks over here at the chai stand, and then somebody here with an oven, a working oven,
Oven.
a vintage working oven, making baked goods.
Wow.
I mean, just the level of dedication. I
Hmm.
hit a dust storm that year. Just before the dust storm, there was a guy out there with this pizza oven. I don't know how in the business that happened. And they said, do you want a slice of pizza? And it was a thin margarita, basil, delicious mozzarella.
Wow.
Yes, please, I will take that. Thank you. It's just, how is this even possible?
Hmm.
That generosity of spirit, I think, is the thing that still blows me away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether that's a piece of artwork or somebody's action like that, where they're
Hmm.
serving you a slice of pizza. And how is this happening? You know,
Yeah, but like in my episode with Chef Juke, like where we're talking about this, and because because he has this sort of like his three pillars kind of thing. Where it's like awe, inspiration, and community. Like that's kind of what's meaningful to him, and yeah, we were talking about awe, and because I remember he was explaining about like the sense of like a child or somebody like seeing something for the first time, and then I also was like, because just to kind of connect with like what you're kind of saying now too is like, even for someone who's been like many years, or even for people like jaded, is like, oh yeah, I've seen the things that'll put hair on your chest, whatever. Like it's like you still come across something, even for like the most jaded of people,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know yeah.
Seeing new people come with those new eyes, there's nothing
Yeah.
more fun than, I think, than, introducing somebody who's never been. I got to do that this year, and it was really,
Do
you know,
you also like to work, or does Media Mecca also help with like the tours, like the art tours? And who do they do that for?
so we were doing the art tours. That changed a bit this year, and maybe we're going to do more art tours in the future. I don't know, but we had been doing art tours basically for media outlets.
Hmm.
So taking them out, and there would be a sunrise tour and an evening tour. Catherine Eldridge was doing it for years. Amazing volunteer on the media team. She's been with us for years. She's out of
Hmm.
Salt Lake in Deer Valley. And then again, the XRT does all of the official, and I know they include some art. So they'll have BLM
Hmm.
officers and all sorts of law enforcement representatives, who knows what.
So is
And they're,
XRT, what does XRT stand for anyway? What
I
is
want to say, external relations team.
is that like government kind of stuff,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
pretty much?
yeah.
Yeah. Oh. Do they get like a lot of customers? I mean, like I mean,
I
who all shows up? I mean,
Well, this is interesting. I learned only recently that Burning Man deals with something like 50 or 60 or maybe even 80 different agencies
what?
just to put the event on. So, and I think that that includes like health, food safety. I
Okay.
think there's probably OSHA is involved there with heavy equipment and everything
Uh-huh.
that DPW does. I wouldn't be surprised if there's another agency around the building of the man and stability, fire, emergency services, the Bureau of Land Management, Washoe County, Pershing County. There are probably other agencies as they pull in folks from different counties.
Uh-huh.
I'm not entirely sure, but
Wow. That's
it's
a
not a
lot.
small. Yeah, it's a pretty significant undertaking.
Yeah, I mean, I take it that it's grown over the years. I mean, sure,
Yeah,
we're supposed to just like, oh, BLM and like Washoe or or
yeah,
whatever county, but
yeah.
yeah, even
Well, I
like
think.
how.
Oh yeah, go ahead, please.
Oh no, no, you go.
I was going to say, I think also probably with the bureaucracy of government, there are sub agencies, and that is accounted for in that whole,
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
not like there are 5 people from the BLM that come, there's
Yeah.
probably sections from the environmental versus law enforcement, that sort of thing. And those
Hmm.
probably count as separate agencies because they require time and attention from the org.
And any other interesting guests? Because I remember Yams was telling me about. He was like, oh yeah, it's like there's been like princes and princesses and like it's like people or celebrities, I'm sure but
I think a lot of that, who knows who
uh-huh,
comes. There was a great story of a friend working the gate, and Katy Perry's paramour at that time was at the gate.
uh-huh.
Um, I think his last name is Bloom.
Oh,
Anyway,
Orlando Bloom.
Orlando Bloom, and he was
Yeah.
saying like, if somebody has a ticket here for me, and the gate is infamously strict,
Mm-hmm.
and they have the opportunity to really give what for another expression of art, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this friend of mine did not believe that this is Orlando Bloom. And then Katy Perry rolls up on a Segway and it's like, I have the ticket for Orlando Bloom. Like she had wrote in from the city. Um, and then there are all the old folks that I think most people know have been around.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we don't necessarily see that at Media Mecca.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay. So
yeah.
you're not tasked with like the Sultan of Brunei or something. It's like, oh, these are a
No,
private tour.
no, not not at Media Mecca. Definitely XRT. XRT will be doing that.
Ah,
Yeah,
that's guess that's where the party's
yeah.
at.
But I think they're mostly government folks that come,
Uh-huh.
that have been
Huh.
involved in the whole process and want to know what's going on out there. So
Oh. Wow.
uh,
No, that is interesting because I never would have thought it would like what up to like 80 different departments. I'm just
that's what I'm third handing this, but it was
uh
somewhere they said between 50 and 80 different agencies.
wow. Wow.
So,
Even the whole OSHA thing, I remember I was talking to Coyote. It was like, oh yeah, it's like, there's a lot of OSHA requirements, and
yep.
I remember it was always like with me and my campmates where we had a joke where it's like, oh, we're gonna do Playa OSHA, and we're gonna go around and put like a big orange sticker on DPW's windshields, be like violation. And they're like, yeah, it always kind of ended there at the conceptual stage because with the DPW person be like, that's your death warrant you're signing if you do that.
Absolutely. Do not mess with the DPW.
Yeah, but it's funny now there actually is Playa
Right.
OSHA. Like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, any final words or anything else you have in your mind?
No, this has just been really delightful. I love reflecting on the event.
Yeah.
It's a really special place, special time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, kind of the whole function of my show, the whole like this shadow of the man, yeah, is to kind of explore, just yeah, like what is it? Like, what is it with these people? Like what?
Why?
Why? Why are you doing this out there? All these, I mean, even like people who've never been before, just like, oh yeah, it's just like that bucket list, like that rave out in the desert,
Yeah,
and it's like you get your like your RV or like your concierge camp or whatever. It's just like, no, it's
not
it's a
that.
it's a lot more,
Yeah.
And
I
I've
did, I was going to say, I did bring my parents in 2015,
oh yeah,
and that was fantastic because I worked for the event back in the early years,
uh
99 through 2005, kind of in and out, alongside Andy Grace. And my parents knew I worked for them, and they always figured it was just a party in the desert. And even
mm-hmm.
though I was in Media Mecca, I never really talked to them about what the event was. And I think I did between that time and when they came out in 2015. But when they came out in
Uh-huh.
2015, their minds were blown. And they're
Yeah.
not exactly hippies. In fact, they're not hippies at all. Uh, so, it just, to me, really speaks to, I don't want to say the power of the event, but the spirit of the event, and
Mm-hmm.
all that the event is, that you can have folks, at that time in their 70s, mid 70s,
Wow.
come out and say, oh, wow, we didn't really understand.
I mean, how did your family dynamic or relationship change, if at all, like after that, where they just kind of like all of a sudden, like, now we're hippies, now we're gonna be like, hugging and.
Yeah, there was none of that. There was no huge transformational period. It was actually pretty funny. My sister had come out 2 years, um, and I had basically gotten her a ticket, had all the food, a place for her to live, yada, yada, yada.
Hmm.
And they, that year in 2015, we were maybe 200 yards apart. And I said to her, Erin, this is your project this year. And we did not see that much of each other.
Oh.
We did have a night when we had all gone out to see some art. And we said, okay, we're going to break off and go do something else. And our parents said, okay, we're going to go back to camp. And we went and did our thing. And then somebody in our group said, hey, let's go back to camp and make grilled cheese. And I said, that sounds great. Let's go get grilled cheese.
Uh,
So we go back, and it's about 9:30. So I walked over to camp to see if they were back,
hmm.
and they weren't. So then I got kind of concerned, and my sister was there with her boyfriend. And finally, at like 10:15, they rolled in, and they had gotten lost. And it was just a very amusing moment of the family dynamic. Did not change in that experience at all. And she said, my mother said, we were down in some back alley near center camp by Media Mecca, and your father would not stop for directions. And just, like, okay, here we are, but we're a Burning Man.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I'd
Oh,
love to take my mom there one of these days, but I don't know.
yeah,
Like, we'll see.
it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. My mom is she's very vocal. I mean, she's
Uh-huh.
kind of like a stream of consciousness type of person, you know. Like, she'll just like point, like arm outstretched, pointing. It's like, look over there. Those two women are kissing. They're lesbians. I was like, yes, mom, that's what they're called. Like, and they love each other and they're having fun. Okay, it's like, it's like, but luck. Like, yes, yes, yes. I can see. I can see.
She does not sound dissimilar to my mother.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my mother's very matter of fact. Like,
Mhm.
my brother, who's my co-conspirator in all my Burning Man stuff, like, we first went together in his Volkswagen GTI 96, and he still lives in San Francisco, and he's a carpenter. He just had like an accident. All I'll say is two words, and everyone can fill in the rest. Just fingers and table saw. So I need to know. So my mom calls me up and it's like, because my mother grew up in South Africa, and so she has kind of like an accent, and so she's like, it's like, your brother's on the way to the hospital, and I was like, oh, what happened? I was like, oh, is he okay? It's like, well, he cut three fingers clean off, and I was like, oh. Oh my God. Yes, blood everywhere. It was quite the scene. I'm like, okay. And then, like, as it turns out, it was like the tips of the fingers, and like they're all still attached. I'm like, oh,
Great.
yeah, thanks, mom. But no, I think I'll have to bring her to Burning Man. That would actually be almost like its own art piece, I think.
Well, please let me know. I love to be an ambassador to parents, whether I'm in Burning Man or the default world.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. So, any final words? If anybody wants to reach you, or do you want to give them a way to?
Sure. Nurse at burningman.org.
Okay. And any plugs or anything you want to plug, or people's projects or anything, or
I will say that we have a really cool spot as a community. It's not really our community spot, but Chicken John has a place out in the Delta. It's about an hour from Oakland,
uh
um, called the Stars and Moon Park.
huh.
And it's on the Sacramento River Delta. Beautiful waterways and wildlife. There are docks and an RV park and a communal kitchen and a stage.
Huh.
And that is a space that he has been working very hard on. For those who don't know Chicken John, He is a character that's been on the scene here for 30 or 35 years, and a force of nature. And it's a delightful spot for gathering community.
Huh.
So
Yeah.
people were interested in doing, it's a property that can be bought out for a weekend. It's a place where you can come up for a weekend. Really delightful. Camping, there are some boats for rent, some RVs for rent. Staying on a boat in the Delta, it's very special.
Yeah, yeah.
So that'll be my plug.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful special interview.
Thank you. It's been a delight.
Hey, thanks.
All right.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please subscribe, rate, and review it on Apple Podcasts. It just helps to get this show seen. Please tell a friend and help to spread the word. If there's enough support, we can do a lot more of these shows and publish more shows per month. If you would like to contact us about being a guest, what you think about the show, or whatever, please send an email to shadowofthemanpodcast, that's all one word, @gmail.com. You can also follow Shadow of the Man on social media on Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube. The links for these pages are all available on the front page of shadowoftheman, all one word, .com. See you next month for a new episode of The Shadow of the Man.
Thank you for listening to this latest show. We have to make another one, so gotta go. Don't worry, for next month we already have one in the can. Very soon you'll be listening to a new Shadow of the Man.